I want to welcome everybody to the Mylio Coffee Break. My name is Angela Andrieux, and I'm a product evangelist for Mylio Photos, which means that I'm here to help you be successful with our software, make sure you have the educational resources that you need. I'm also the host of this Coffee Break series, where we talk about different areas of the app and we bring in special guests. And today we have Cathi Nelson. So Cathi is the CEO of the Photo Managers, which is an organization that serves entrepreneurs through training, professional certification, partnerships, and educational conferences built around helping people manage and organize their photos. She's been featured in the New York Times, The Atlantic, Real Simple Magazine, The Wall Street Journal, about organizing, preserving your family's heritage and legacy through photos. So welcome, Cathi. We're super excited to have you today. And I think this is a great topic for our Mylio users, because that's what so many of us are trying to do, is get all of our photos from our old printed photos that are in boxes that are in albums to all the ones that we're collecting and making every day digitally, getting them organized. So I look forward to hearing from you and seeing what tips you can share with us on taming the monster that is our pictures.
Yeah, thank you, Angela. I was thrilled to be invited. Welcome, everybody. And it's been nice seeing people put in the chat. I see some familiar faces too. Members of the professional photo organizing community are joining as well. And so tonight, I'm going to focus mostly, or for me, it's evening, but for you all, it's day, on printed photos. So, and how Mylio, and I'll let Angela talk a little bit more about how Mylio can be of support for you with that. I am been using Mylio, but I'm not a pro by any stretch at my ability to use Mylio, but I do have a lot of most of my family photos are there in Mylio. So I'm going to share a PowerPoint with you. So I'm going to share my screen. Oops, didn't mean to share my emails. I'm trying to find my oops, wrong screen. Hang on. Stop share. You see way too many of my busy desktop, right? I didn't want that to be seen. That should be.
It just shows that you're human. Like we all have that.
It should be a secret, right? Every once in a while, I clean it up and then it gets all messy again. So if anybody can relate, go ahead and put it. Go ahead and feel free to own that as well. So, and I'm going to stop my video just for a minute. So today, this presentation I'm going to do is called Organizing Your Photo Legacy, Insider Tips from Professional Photo Organizers. So please, if you have questions and things, put them in the chat. I know, Angela, we can either, however works for you all, you can interrupt me while I'm speaking, or we can take the questions at the end. I'm flexible either way. And have done this many times. So my goal today is help you to go from feeling overwhelmed by the sheer volume of photos you have to empowered using the 5 steps that professional photo organizers use to help their clients organize their photo collections. But first, let me promise that you're not alone with this problem, because over 1.7 trillion printed photos exist in the world based on the research that people have done. And we know we are taking over 1 billion digital photos every year. So if you feel overwhelmed by your photos, you are not by any stretch alone. And many of those printed photos is what we're really focusing more on today, are languishing in shoeboxes, bins, drawers, and faded photo albums. So you can drop a note in the chat if that sounds familiar. So again, my name is Cathi Nelson. I'm the founder and CEO of the Photo Managers. We are a global educational association that offers classes, an annual conference, professional certification, and a supportive, engaged community for the growing career of professional photo organizers, or we call ourselves photo managers often. So yes, that is a thing. People are so overwhelmed that they are more and more looking to experts who really focus on this field to hire them to help them with their photos. I'm also the author of 2 books, Photo Organizing Made Easy, Going from Overwhelmed to Overjoyed. And for those of you who are interested in this growing career opportunity, a book called The Business Roadmap for Professional Photo Organizers. So that's enough about me, because more importantly, I have been passionately sharing this message for a number of decades now. But I always start with this question of why, right? Why does this topic matter? And I love this quote. There have been great societies that did not have the wheel, but no societies that did not tell stories. And I believe firmly, and you can let me know if you agree in the chat, that our photos are the way we tell the stories of our lives, right? They're our connection to our family, to our friends, to the past, and they're a message to the future. But if your photos are completely disorganized, and if you can't find the photos you care about because they're lost in a sea of digital data or in a box, you can't really tell those stories. And Angela was just telling me just now, as you were all joining in, how she scanned some old photos of her was it your grandfather, maybe?
It was actually art photos that my great grandfather had taken, and they were 16 by 20 prints that he had submitted to a camera club that he belonged to.
Wow. So there's right? There's that connection from the past, right? I bet you feel connected to him because you're also a professional photographer, right? And
Absolutely.
the story there, I'm sure there's a great story about how he took those photos and what camera he used and things like that, right?
Yep.
So here's an example of what I mean when I talk about the value of these stories. These two photos will tell you a lot about our family history, right? In just two photos. So my husband, who's the youngest in the black and white photo, grew up in Daytona Beach, Florida. And every summer, his family would take a road trip in this old station wagon, pulling a pop-up trailer in the 1960s. Their goal was to see all lower 48 states. And we marvel today at how they did that, right? No air conditioning, no seatbelts, 4 kids, but it's a cherished memory in their family. Both his sisters continued that tradition when they got married. And I always joke that our marriage wouldn't have made it if I didn't agree to that tradition. We did it a little differently. We only had 2 kids and we had to fly to different states a lot of times and rent a car. And we would check off the states on a big map. And this is the photo that we took when we made it to all 48 states. So now 25 years later, our kids and my nieces and nephews are doing the same. And there's a great quote by Mark Twain that was told to Larry, by his parents, and we've taught it to our kids, that travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness. So that's just a small example of why telling stories with just a few photos is so important. But if your photos are a completely disorganized mess, it's really hard to accomplish that. So are you ready to get started? Today, I'm going to share a high-level overview of the 5 steps that professional photo organizers use, and then we'll dig in to the most time-consuming, but what I feel is the critically important part of this, which is the sorting part of this. These are the 5 steps. They can work both with printed photos and with digital photos, but again, I'm focusing mostly on printed today. And again, ask your questions, and I'll be happy to help. So the 5 steps are, first of all, is you need to have a goal, right? What is your end goal with your photo organizing project? Are you interested in passing down a photo legacy? Are you downsizing and you want to pass on photos to the next generation? Are you just ready to get your photos in some kind of format so that you can see them again, enjoy them? But really take some time to think about the why, because knowing your goal will keep you motivated when you start to feel somewhat overwhelmed. The next is probably the thing that can take the longest. It's collecting all your photos in one place and take an inventory so that you know what you have. And we have some handouts actually that you can, with easy to fill out forms that to help you with this process. And I'll drop that in the chat in a moment, where you can just like use a checkoff thing. Because sometimes we have no idea where all our photos are. And to be honest with you, I'm in the process myself, the shoemaker has no shoes, of starting this because my son is getting married Labor Day. And I realize I need to get his childhood photos and then merge them with his fiance's photos so I can make that really fun video slideshow to show at the rehearsal dinner. So I'm actually in this process of kind of, I think I know where everything is, but his childhood photos were analog photos. And so I'm in this process where I'm discovering some old memory cards and some CDs where I had put photos on. And I'm sure I'll have a lot of duplicates when I merge all this, but I'm also looking back into the boxes and where are the old family photos that I didn't maybe put into an album and things like that. So the goal is to collect everything and then to do an inventory. And so that I know, I have 3 external hard drives. I had 4 phones, 5 boxes of photos. I know in my collection, I have 14 large 12 by 12 scrapbook photo albums that need to be digitized and scanned so that I can have access to those photos. And so it's really important to go through this process of collecting. The third step, which is, again, what I'm going to talk a little bit more about today, is the sorting. And I use an easy to memorize acronym called the ABCs of photo organizing. I created that many years ago to help people visualize this process. And a lot of people like using that. And so you want to make sure that your photos are in categories that make sense to you. It can be location, date range, events, people's names, but you want to make sure that you're going to have a process where you can sort through those photos. The 4th step is save, which is the importance of backing up so your photos are protected from natural and digital disasters. And last of all, the most fun is sharing those photos, because once they're in some kind of order and you find the photos that you like, now you can do lots of fun things with them, like put them in photo books, put them on websites, slideshows. There's all sorts of things that you can do. And Mylio certainly covers the need in a lot of these areas. And again, Angela can kind of talk a little bit more in depth about that, but Mylio certainly clicks off a lot of these boxes at this point.
Yep.
So are you ready for the ABCs of printed photo organizing? If you're going to get into those old boxes of photos, here's some things that you might want to have handy when you start that process. You might need some tools like dental floss or a craft spatula that can help you get those photos that are kind of adhered to those old magnetic albums with the glue and things. A notebook and a camera so you can start making notes and document the process. Gloves and a mask. The mask is a lot of times, if your photos have been stored in old boxes up in the attic or basement, they can have mold spores on them. It's easier probably to find a mask today than it was when I started doing this many years ago. We all have masks, I think. So those can really come in handy. Sticky notes and index cards, again, is a way to keep track of things. Some different boxes so that you can start sorting. If you go into a sort, depending on what method of sorting you're going to use, you don't want to keep going over the photos over and over again. And a garbage bag, because I'm going to talk to you in a minute about why it's okay and important to throw away some of those photos. So one of the acronym, this ABCs I created, is just a simple way to kind of keep this in mind, is you want to ask yourself as you're looking at all those photos, because you're going to get overwhelmed with a sense of nostalgia. It's easy for me to organize another person's photos because I don't have that same sense of emotional connection. But I know when I'm getting ready to do this project, like I mentioned, I'm going to go down memory lane pretty quickly and marvel at my son when he was 3 and 5 and 10 and you know, shed the tear that, oh my gosh, you know, he's getting married now. So the first step is determining if your photos are an A album. I call that like album worthy. Doesn't mean you're going to put them in albums, but it means kind of you would be willing to see these in an album. These pictures are what we call the best of the best. They belong in an album. They're the memories you would really mourn as well if you lost them through. And today we know there's all sorts of ways that photos are at risk, from fires and floods and tornadoes and hurricanes. I mean, there's not a minute you don't turn on the news and something crazy has happened like that. Also, there's just time, the obsolescence of time and things. So these are the photos you're going to want to scan, back up, and share and display. It doesn't, again, mean we're going to put them all in an album. So if you come across these A photos, and if you're working with like a piling system or box, you can put them in the A photo box or the A place so that you make sure you pull them aside. Now, once I created this, though, I always know, myself included, that it's really hard to make that decision sometimes, right? And you can, especially if you took 5 group family photos or a bunch of photos of a sunset, or, you know, you're like, well, is this the A photo or is this the A photo? I can't really make that decision. So I call those the B photos. You can put them back in a box. They're the ones that support your best. You can't quite part with them yet, but they're not the most important photos that you have. Those photos will be archived for safekeeping, but not necessarily scanned. You don't have to, not suggesting that you scan every photo that you have. And you can start, I always kind of joke that you can put a note on the box that if you inherit this box after I passed away, you're welcome to dispose of these photos. So that's because a lot of times we hear that all the time, like you inherit boxes of photos, you don't know who's in the photos, because people have a really hard time throwing photos away, which brings me to this C, that yes, you can toss your photos in the trash can. You can repurpose them or just throw them away. Your collection, if it's like most people, are filled, I'm sure, with doubles and triples in really badly composed photos. If your photos don't fall into one of those categories, it's a C photo. And I encourage you to be brutal here. And it's hard to do this, but once you get going, it gets a lot easier. So the goal, the rule of thumb, as I say, is to eliminate 80% of your photos and keep your favorite 20%. And we know the average family has anywhere from 5,000 to 6,000 printed photos. So even if you're only keeping 20%, say of 5,000 photos, that's still going to be close to 1,000 photos. And because think about those stories. People are much more attached and able to understand the story and the legacy you're wanting to pass down if they're not looking at thousands and thousands and thousands of photos. Again, this is optional, though. I'm always clear about that. If you don't want to throw your photos away, you don't have to, but it's certainly not a bad thing to consider doing. And then this is the S part, which I think is really the most important part. Does the photo tell a story? These pictures play a significant role because there's something illustrative about the picture, even though it may not be obvious. A picture of a single tree in the background may be meaningless unless it's the full-grown sapling your great-grandfather planted before he passed away, right? Those S photos are the ones that matter and tell a story. And depending on what works best for you, you can put those in a special container review later, or start writing down those stories on that index card or that sticky note you collected prior to the beginning. So you're starting to capture that information. And now I like to tell people that you can break the rules. This question of, do you want to organize your photos chronologically or by events? I like to say that we live in time, date, order. Like, you know, today's Wednesday for, no, today's Tuesday, but the fellow in New Zealand mentioned today is Wednesday for him. So we know that, you know, it's 2023, hard to believe. And that, so that's, we live in chronological order, right? So I know, like, my son's wedding date is coming up in Labor Day, and that'll be in the beginning of September and things like that. But we tend to, a lot of times, I think, remember thematically. So if you have not kept your printed photo collection in date order always, because you just didn't keep them in the envelopes they came in or whatever, a lot of people get stuck and they never go through this process because they have this panic feeling that, I don't know if this was Christmas 1960 or 1963, or I don't know if Johnny's 4 in this picture or if he's 5 in this picture. And it almost can cause people to freeze with indecision about taking this process. So I tell people it's okay to think about what are you can organize chronologically. And the good news is, once you put the proper dates on your photos, and I know Mylio allows you to do that, and Angela can talk about that, you'll be able to, the computer itself will date sort your photos. But if you're interested in organizing by thematically, here's some suggestions about what I mean by that. Say you're a family that love to travel, like our family loved to travel. I can organize our family photos as, we're a family that love to travel, using that Mark Twain quote. And it doesn't really matter if I remember the order of the times when, you know, did we go to Indiana in 1999, or did we go in, 2005? It doesn't really matter. What matters more is the theme about why we travel to all those states. So I can organize my photos by my favorite pets, by my favorite theme, by my favorite places that I've traveled, by these are the people I love and the people we love. These are by brothers and sisters. You know, there's so many different themes that you can get creative with. And then when you're telling that story in an album or in some kind of format, it can be much more interesting to look at it, not always in date time order. So if you say there's a favorite place that you went on vacation every summer, maybe you go to, here in the Northeast, you're going to go to Maine, the coast of Maine maybe, or Cape Cod. Those are very popular places. What you really want to capture is those memories of what it felt like as you crossed the bridge or smelled the salt air. Is, you know, you kind of, it's August and the warmth of the summer sun and things like that. Those are the themes of your life that you remember. And that's much more important than worrying about, do you have everything in order? So hopefully that's a little helpful in terms of helping you to break some of the rules depending on where you are. And so now we'll, in a minute here, take questions, but we'd love to have you, if you're interested in learning more about the photo managers, you can go to thephotomanagers.com. And I'll drop that chat in the chat in a moment. You can download our family timeline at thephotomanagers.com/book downloads. We have an amazing private Facebook page for the consumers called the Photo Organizing Hub. People ask questions about every topic imaginable, and our professionals they're listed as an expert, and they go in and ask questions. It's a no sales environment, so we don't allow linking or different things. We want it to be really educational. And I think we have almost 8,000 people in there currently. Nice. And so there's some other things here that you can do as well. So I'm going to stop my share and see if there's any questions or thoughts that people had that came up through this process.
If you'd like, you can go ahead and pop any questions you have into the chat, or feel free to unmute and ask your questions. And if there's no questions right at this moment, what I can do is share my screen and share my personal collection of Mylio here. You get to see my email as well. So I've got a folder up here of images that I scanned. These were in an envelope that my mom handed me. And these were, they're kind of scattered. They go through the 70s and then
they look like the 70s.
Yeah, it's definitely the 70s. And then some in here into my childhood, and then, you know, my little brother, and they're a little bit all over the place. So, and then, you know, we've got some in here that were my grandmother, just tons and tons and tons of different things in here. And so I scanned these into my computer using the Epson Fast Photo Scanner, which is a sheet fed scanner. Brilliant piece of machinery, a little bit pricey, but an awesome investment for a lot of people if you have a big project like this that you want to take on. If it seems a little too expensive to take on just for yourself, one thing I considered doing before I got mine was possibly splitting the cost with several family members, because we all have our own piles of photos that we want to get organized. And if we kind of pooled our resources to get this machine, we could all use it and just take turns scanning in our different libraries. So that's something to think about if, the thought of spending, a good bit of money on a single-use scanner to do one project seems overwhelming. Consider splitting that cost with family or selling it when you're done. So there's lots of different ways to make this happen. There's also professional services that you can hire to digitize these things for you. But I went ahead and scanned all these in myself. And I'm going to go ahead and scroll back up here to the top, and let's talk a bit about dates. So one of the things, let me check here on the participants list. And I'm going to go ahead and if you don't have a question, I'm going to go ahead and keep you muted, because there's a lot of background noise. But if you have a question, please feel free to unmute. So these first handful of images in here definitely have that 70s look to them. And right now I have them marked as undated. When you initially bring in scanned images, it's going to show the date that you scan them, which is almost always going to be incorrect when we're talking about our family historical photos. So when I go into Mylio, the first thing I do with my scanned photos, if I don't immediately know the date, is I mark them as undated. And you can do this for one image or a group of images. So for right now, let me go ahead and just select these couple of rows of images. I can click on the date more menu here, scroll down to the bottom and just choose undated. And what this does is it creates kind of a to-do list for me of images to research, because I can go over here to the calendar view, and the calendar shows me all my pictures on a calendar, and I can go back and back and back and back. And if I go all the way to the top, I have this undated category I can go ahead and click in, and I know that these are images that I need to research and find additional information about. So for now, I'm going to actually jump back over to this folder, and as you go through and organize your family's images, there's going to be a lot that you don't know when they were happening, and you don't have any way of finding out exactly when those things happened. So don't get, I saw analysis paralysis pop up in the chat. Don't let that frighten you away from trying to organize some of these images. One thing that we have in Mylio Photos that's unique is we have the concept of what we call fuzzy dates. You don't have to know the exact date of something. You can assign a date range. So let me go ahead. I'm going to again select a bunch of images here. Let me go ahead and grab that first one, and I'm just going to scroll down. And I think right about, let's say through there, I'm going to guess I have a fairly good idea that those were all captured in the 70s. So what I'm going to do is actually click into this more menu here, and I can choose month and year. I can choose a date range, season, year, or I can even choose decade. So what I'm going to do is just go back here and put that into the 70s, hit save. And now all of those images now have 1970s on there. If I go to my calendar and I scroll to the 70s, you can see these images are starting to populate in the 70s. And it's because we had called them a fuzzy date. So they're not going to show up on a specific date because we didn't give them a specific date, but it gets you in the general range, and it helps you get things better organized. If you find out more information later, you can always go back in there and change it. But it's a great way to really view your life in pictures and get those old images organized. Another thing that I want to point out is knowing who's in those pictures. So the farther away we get from when those pictures were taken, the less likely we're going to know who was in them. Mylio has some wonderful face tagging tools. So let me go ahead and just click on this one here for my parents' wedding. And I'm going to scroll down here. And I know, okay, so that's my mom and my grandma. I can go into our face tagging tool. You can see that I've already tagged them. And then when I want to find those images, I can go up here to the people view, and I can find all of the images that I have spanning decades of time of both my grandmother, my mother, and many, many members of my family that I've gone through and tagged. Mylio makes it super easy. So there's a lot of different ways with this software that you can go through and follow those steps that Cathi just shared with us and get them organized in Mylio Photos so you can share them and enjoy them. So are there any questions?
There's quite a few questions that have come in.
Awesome.
I can read them to you if you want. if that makes it
Well,
easier.
are they questions for you or questions for me?
I think I'm going to answer the one question that, well, let me look and see. I got to
Yeah, go for it.
Somebody asked me the Mark Twain quote. I was able to do that quickly. All right, let me go back.
Very cool.
Let's see. Analysis, okay. What strategy and how might you leverage Mylio to see everything and then organize by those categories you referenced?
That's a great question. Do you have any thoughts on that you want to share?
Like I said, I'm just starting to really use Mylio more, so I think you might be a better. I know using your albums is probably one way that I would do it, but I want to I'd rather you answer that.
So albums would be a great way to do that, to sort, and especially before you're ready to delete things. But one of the things that I really like are rating and tagging tools. So let me go ahead and pull up our rating bar here. And we have flags, star ratings, and color labels. So you can assign different ratings, colors, or a flag state to different types of images. So for instance, let's take a look at this image versus this one. And I'm going to turn off the face tagging so that's out of the way. Both of these are the same image, and they were brought in because the scanner, the Epson Fast Photo Scanner, gives you the option to have two versions of your image. One that it automatically enhances for you, and then one that's the original. So this is the original, and this is the enhanced version. Which one do you think is better? Kind of a no-brainer, right?
Yep. So
for me, I would choose this one as a pick and give that a pick flag. And I would give this one a reject flag. And we've got keyboard shortcuts that can help you with that. So the X is the reject and P is a pick. And as I go through these images, I can sort through which ones I want to keep and which ones I want to get rid of. Now that doesn't actually delete anything, but you can hide them. So if I go up to the More menu here in the upper right, I can tell it to not show my rejected photos, and it's just going to hide them from me. So they're still there in my system, but it cleans up the view so I can go through and really focus on the ones that are the most important. So that's one way to do that. You can also assign color labels and then use the filters to find those images as you need them. And again, as Cathi mentioned, you've got albums as well, where you can sort things. And these are like playlists for your photos. It doesn't move anything on your hard drive. If you put something in an album and then you remove it, it doesn't delete it, but it allows you to sort things in different ways. So you can have a set of albums that you have for sorting into those ABCs. And then you can have other albums that you've got sorted for, dad's retirement party and your brother's birthday. You can have all of these different albums and different topics. It's very, very flexible. So those are some of the options that I would say to go through and start doing that sorting. My favorite is the pick flags and the reject flags. And the cool thing about that is once you go through and you start doing those pick and reject flags, you can go up to the the organize menu, and you can tell it quickly to delete rejected photos. So once you've gone through and you've established all of these rejected photos are nothing I need, you can go ahead and permanently delete those, clean up the disk space, clean up your library, and move on.
All right. I think, I'm sure you talk about this a lot when you do anything, the more you use something, it's like a muscle memory, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Knowing your way around things and things like that. So somebody asked, can you address finding and eliminating the duplicate digital?
Absolutely. So that's a big problem that all of us have, especially when we start bringing in our digital images too. So maybe you save a phone, maybe you put some Google Photos, and those might overlap somewhat, and then you get them all into Mylio, and you've got all of these different versions of the same image. So we have a great tool inside of Mylio. I'm going to go ahead and just go to all photos for a minute here and go up to organize and choose find duplicate photos. And I'm going to X out of the blue boxes, though. When you go through this process yourself, I do encourage you to read those. It's got some helpful information. But what it does is it goes through and it finds exact duplicates in your library. And what I mean by exact duplicates is it was made with the same camera. It has exactly the same dimensions. What Mylio does, and we're going to get a little technical here, is it puts a hash that identifies every image. And that's what Mylio uses to determine what's unique and what's a duplicate. So it's gone through and it's found a whole bunch of things that are duplicates in my library. So what I can do is go through these and get rid of all of the unnecessary stuff. Now, right now, I've got 497 files. Some of you might have thousands and thousands. I've gone through this process before, And as I bring in more things, I keep finding more duplicates. So it just happens. Something you're going to have to kind of keep up with as you go through. But to help you figure out which ones to keep, we have an option here called auto check. And there are a lot of different parameters here. I'm going to go ahead and leave them at the default and say run auto check. And it's going to go through and decide for me which ones I should keep and which ones I should get rid of. So the ones with the X are ones that it's saying probably should delete. And the ones that are not are the ones to keep. What happens from this point is I can either delete them, and that's a permanent delete, or I can move them outside of my Mylio Photos library. So if I'm not sure and you can't quite pull the trigger to delete things, you can always move them outside of your Mylio Photos library. When you do that, whether you're moving them or you're deleting them, one of the great things that Mylio does is it merges your metadata. So if you've gone through and you've added some face tags to one, you've added some keywords to another, maybe you changed the date on this one, but the date on this one's wrong, it will merge that information together so you're not losing any of that information that you've added when you go through and you remove those duplicates.
And so somebody asked the question on the duplication delete, what exactly is deleted?
So if I go through and I click delete right now, all of these images that have the X will be permanently deleted from my system.
Are they deleted only from Mylio or the original file location as well?
The original file is deleted as well. So when you delete something from Mylio, whether it's from deduplication or whether I'm just, let me go ahead and X out of this. And let's say I want to delete this photo that I highlighted right here. If I go ahead and hit delete on my keyboard, or I click the little trash can icon up here, that is going to permanently delete the original photo. Now, when I do that, it's going to pop up a message and say, hey, this is a permanent action. Are you sure you want to do this? So I go ahead and I click yes. What happens then is it goes to your system trash. You have one more opportunity there before you empty your trash or empty your recycle bin to tell your computer to put it back. If you put it back, Mylio will rescan and pull it back in. If you empty your system trash, it is then permanently gone from your computer. The only way at that point to get anything like that back is if you have system backups. Let's say if you're on Mac, you have Time Machine, or you use a cloud backup service like Backblaze, then you can get, perhaps get those back from some of your other backup things, but it is meant to be a permanent action. So there's a few, a couple of courses of recourse there if you accidentally delete something. And we really do try to make sure it's not something you do on accident, but it does happen.
Okay, so somebody, maybe that's Barbara, who I think should ask this other question, that she's challenged how understanding Mylio's folder is used regarding storing photos that are multiple other storage devices. I think you just answered that, right?
Well, so Mylio is kind of unique in that you have all of these different devices that you can connect to your Mylio Photos library. So let me just jump over to my dashboard. You can take a look at all of the devices that I have. So right now, this is the Mac that I'm on. I have another Mac that is nearby. I've got my iPad, my iPhone, and I have all of these other storage devices. So each one of these that is listed as a vault has a copy of everything. So what a vault is in Mylio is it's a device that holds your originals, it holds your catalog, all the information you've added about your photos. I could rebuild my library from any one of those vaults. So if my computer dies and I lose everything on my computer, when it comes to my photos, this is not a global recreate all your data. This is just your Mylio library. I can recreate my Mylio library from any one of these vaults. So my originals live on each one of those devices. I can pull an original off of this little Crucial drive. I can pull an original off my Drobo and so forth. So those are, you can consider one of them, the primary and the rest of them backups, but they all to me are kind of backups and they're all different sources that I can pull those originals from. Mylio keeps them all in sync. And the way my system is set up, Amazon Drive is going away soon, so that's not going to be there much longer. My Drobo, a piece of equipment that I love, is unfortunately becoming obsolete. The company is in bankruptcy and they are not doing any more upgrades. So I can't upgrade my old Mac because it would stop talking to my Drobo. So that one's going to be going away at some point, which is why I added this guy here. That was my first option to replace the Drobo. And then I recently picked up this little drive. It's a little SSD drive that I use for travel, and it holds all of my pictures as well. So I can carry that with me. So I have multiple ways to access my photos no matter where I'm at and what I'm doing. Hope that answered your question and didn't give you too much information to confuse it. Let's see here.
Are you?
Is there any advantage to using a cell phone to scan images versus an actual scanner? Kathy, I'll let you answer that
I
one.
did answer it. I did.
Okay, awesome.
Yep. So I answered in the chat.
Perfect. Let's see here. Fuzzy dating. Da-da-da. Just scanning through here and seeing what's here. Perfect. Barbara wants to know, what does reject mean? So it's a flag that you can add in Mylio Photos that you can use it to indicate different things. So for me, it means it's something that I probably want to get rid of. How does it differ from Lightroom? That's a great question. So Lightroom is really, in my opinion, meant to be used on a single computer. I have used Lightroom for years. I've been a Lightroom user since version 1. So I think it's a wonderful program and it's got some great editing tools in it as well. The problem I ran into is I wanted to be able to access my my photos from more than one device. So you could use Adobe's cloud, but for me, it was cost prohibitive. It would have cost me probably close to $1,000 a year to synchronize all of my images with Adobe's cloud. And I can't imagine a world in which I could just make that happen and really justify it. Then I learned about Mylio. For $100 a year. I could be able to access all my photos from all my devices. It keeps everything in sync, and I can still use Lightroom, and I can use Adobe Camera Raw and all the other editing tools that I'm used to. It took me that next step over a hurdle. Now there's some things that I wish Mylio had that Lightroom has, so I could completely not use Lightroom at all. Absolutely. But little inside baseball, a lot of those things are coming and getting better. So if you're a diehard Lightroom user, don't be afraid to keep using Lightroom and have Mylio synchronizing your library to different devices to help you keep backed up, to be able to access from different devices. They can live together. So let's see here.
Angela, can I add something there?
Of course.
A couple of things since the Lightroom issue came up. Back when you were discussing dates and the undated option that you use, brilliant, by the way. In my Lightroom days, actually, first off, let me say to everybody here, I am not Mylio. I'm a Mylio user. But,
Gone 5. Do you want to watch?
Go ahead, Mark.
But I was on Lightroom for over a decade, so I'm pretty familiar with the Adobe line of products. I got around, for those that are on Lightroom and potentially thinking of switching to Mylio, and I did this before I switched. Everything I had that was undated, which Lightroom deals with very strangely, I moved into January 1, 1970. Just because it was a date that I didn't have anything. And I picked them up and moved them all to Lightroom or to Mylio that way. And that's how I got around Lightroom's inadequacy of dealing with undated items. The second thing is I brought in 110,000 photos and videos. And when Mylio released the deduplicate option, I was a little skeptical coming from Lightroom and the various options that have failed with Lightroom. There's 2 products in particular that have been out for years. Both of them are pretty weak as far as automatic. You can't trust them. You got to go through duplicate set by duplicate set to know you're getting the right one. Out of my 110,000 pictures, 7,000 were videos. So over 90,000 were actual photos. It took Mylio a while to get through it, but when it got through it, it got every one perfect. I didn't have one picture that I needed to go through and say, no, you picked the wrong one. And I didn't change off their defaults. I looked very closely at them and considered it, and then I better leave it alone. So that was my input on Lightroom.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. I see here, how do you attach notes to photos in Mylio? Many of the photos have notes on the back in the album, which have been scanned. Great question. Let me jump over here to, again, this folder. So one thing I love about the Fast Photo Scanner is, in addition to scanning the front of the photo and making the better copy of it, it also scans the back of it if it detects text. So a cool thing about Mylio is if there is text in an image, Mylio can read it. So for instance, if I wanted to search here in 1936, this is in November 1936, was this image of my grandmother and her parents. Mylio would actually find that if I go ahead and type in 1936 without me changing the date, without me doing anything. So there's that. But if you have information that you want to record in the metadata, what I would do at that point is first, I would change the date. If I have date information, I would go ahead and update the date created. And then if there were notes on who was in it, I would go ahead and create people tags. If there was GPS information, or it said, I have another image that it says on the back, it was taken in El Paso, Texas. It was of my other grandmother and her brother. I can go and over to the map and I can do a search for El Paso, Texas, and I can actually drag it onto the map. So those are all ways that you can add more information. But if you have notes about a story, right now our options are to put it in title and caption. Now, I know there is a character limit here in the caption. I'm not sure what that limit is, but you definitely can get a couple of sentences in there and put a little bit of information in there to add some context. In the future, Mylio is going to be bringing in an option to have an unlimited field where you can add full-on stories if you want to. But right now, title and caption are your best option. You can also add some keywords if that's helpful. All right.
I was the one who asked that question, Ms. Larry.
Yeah, no
And
problem.
what I really have are handwritten notes that my
Mhm.
wife made or somebody else made on the back of photos.
Mhm.
I'd like to kind of overlay or combine those two images. Is there any way to do that?
There's always a way. There's not necessarily a way to do that in Mylio. That's something that I would probably go into something like Photoshop or Affinity Photo and combine the two images that way.
Even Luminar with the transparent
Yeah,
layer.
that's true.
A lot
The only
cheaper.
thing is I would be partial to having them kind of offset, not necessarily one over the top of the other.
Yeah.
If you want to straight layer one on top of the other, Luminar Neo can definitely do that. If you want something that you can actually expand the canvas and put them next to each other, but in the same image file, that's where you would need something like Photoshop or Affinity, possibly even Photoshop Elements could do it. That's a much less expensive option than getting full on Photoshop.
Okay, could you add that to chat or somebody?
Yeah, of
You
course.
mentioned a whole bunch of stuff real fast.
Yeah. Let me do that right now. There we go. All right. Can Mylio do collages? Not at this time. Collages are kind of a fun thing though. There's an app that I have. Oh, I don't even know if I have it anymore. It was just a cheapie. I don't know, it's $5 or $10. I downloaded from the App Store. It's called Collage Creator. And you just drag all your pictures that you want in the collage into it, and it would randomly place them, and you could drag them around and move them. Very simple app for one purpose only, but it was the best way to create a collage. And I have a ton of photo software, and that was the best one for that one purpose. So I would just do a search for an app that does that. And if you wanted to, say, make a collage of, let's say, these 4 images, I would then just export these to my hard drive, maybe a folder on my desktop, and then drag them into that collage creator and do it that way. That's probably the best. Let's see here. Taking a look here through the comments, seeing what else I missed here. If I miss you, please don't hesitate to speak up and let me know, because sometimes things get lost in the chat and there's been a lot of comments.
Yeah, I've been trying to keep up with it for you.
I appreciate that. It's always good to have help. Let's see here. Let's see. How does Mylio sync different vaults? i.e., do you assign particular drives as clouds or vaults? That's a great question, Alan. Yes. So you can assign a role to different devices. So for instance, if I look at what I have going in my Mylio, you can see that I have a cloud service designated as a vault, and I have several external drives designated as vaults. My iPad, my iPhone, and my 2 laptops are not. They're all auto-optimized. So if I go into device quality, they have this auto-optimized setting. And what that means is Mylio is looking at how much space is available on that device and what images I look at and work with most. And it'll keep thumbnails on every device. And then it will also bring in higher quality smart previews as space allows. And then I can also download and access the original quality on demand. So it's a very smart system, and it takes care of managing that space for you, but you decide which devices have which role. So for me, my Macs and my iPhone and my iPad, they're what I call viewing devices. I use them to organize and view and go through my library, whereas these devices down here, the external drives in the cloud, those are storage devices. And depending on how much room you have on a given storage device, you can designate it as a vault or not. So there's a lot of different options there. All right. Can the main Mylio photo, let's see, requested to be set up on sign up, be placed on an external drive and not a PC? Yes, you can do that. There is an article in the appendix of our manual on how to do that. The caveat is Mylio will not run unless the drive that you put that on is connected. So if you're working on a desktop computer and you have a drive that's always plugged in and you want to move your Mylio system folder to that external drive, you absolutely can do that. It works brilliantly. The thing is if you have that drive disconnected, you won't be able to access your Mylio. So that's the only thing to pay attention to there. And if you need to get to that article, you can go do that from the help menu, go to the how-to guide, and that's going to pull up a browser. Let me go ahead and grab my browser window and bring that over. And if you scroll down to the bottom, we have an appendix, and right there, moving your Mylio system folder. And it's got the instructions on how to do that right there. All right. Can Mylio sync with Google Photos as a vault? So that's a great question, Alan. So one thing that a lot of people don't realize is that Google Photos and Google Drive there's two separate services, or think of them as two different doors to the same building. We work with Google Drive. We do not work with Google Photos. You can download information from Google Photos and import it into Mylio to have it stored locally. So if you wanted to pull your information off of Google Photos and bring it into Mylio, that's possible. We also have the option to use Google Drive as a vault. So if you wanted to do that, let me go ahead and switch back over to Mylio and close out of this. And I'm going to go up to, just go ahead and hit the back button here, go up to the top, and I want to add a device. You would go to add a cloud service, and you would add Google Drive here. And that's how you would do that. Now, one thing to note when you add a cloud service with Mylio Photos, that is made to facilitate your syncing and for you to be able to access your images on the go and also give you a backup off-site. It is not meant for viewing on that service. So if you do use Google Drive as a cloud service with Mylio, it's not meant for you to go onto the Google Drive website and peruse your photos that way. It's meant to be viewed through Mylio. If you mess with the folders that Mylio creates on a cloud service, it can corrupt your library. So please use caution in doing that. That is something that it happens once in a while. So I just wanted to point that out. All right. Okay, Michael says, please clarify, Mylio is primarily a sync service with amazing organizing services, but it's not a cloud or storage service. Great point. So Mylio itself is an application and a service. So the application is what you're seeing me manipulate here on the screen. And the service is what allows it to synchronize your photos between various devices that you control. Mylio does not control any of those services. So the cloud services that you can optionally connect are third-party services that you sign up for. So you are in control of that. You are in control of your computers, your mobile devices, your external drives. All of your data is stored on devices that you control. We do not control it. We do not see it. So I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you, Michael, for pointing that out. All right.
Angela,
Yes.
it's Rob Hoff. Hi, I have a
Hi.
question. I put it in the chat and hopefully you can hear me. With respect to the color labels, I'm trying to remember, right now you can't actually put text to say like red would be cold photos or things of that sort, but that's planned in the future. Am I correct with my memory?
You know, I'm not sure if that's on the immediate plan or not. I think I've seen that request before. And if that's something that would be useful to you, which I think that would be a very cool feature. Right now, you kind of have to remember what you're assigning different colors for, and I never can. You can go to forum.mylio.com. There's a section there for feature requests, and that is monitored by our product team very, very closely.
Okay, because I know you can do that in Lightroom. The other question is, I always forget what translates to Lightroom. Well, clearly you're not going to want to develop at Mylio and Lightroom, but I believe the ratings and the labels do, because they're standard metadata, but not
Correct.
the flags, because Lightroom doesn't use the standard. Is that correct? Or
That
am
is
I
absolutely
wrong?
correct.
Okay, I was listening when you presented that a month or 2 or 3 months ago. So that's good to know. What about the date? Let's assume you put a date in a scan photo, a specific date. Will that, since it's in the metadata, will that be seen in Lightroom Classic, or do you have to synchronize it, or what?
Well, so if you do it in Mylio, it's automatically saved to XMP. The fuzzy dates are also in XMP, but Mylio does not read the fuzzy dates. It's only going to read the one that's a timestamp, which makes you choose an hour, month, or hour, minute, second, and so forth. So you don't have to necessarily be super precise. You can keep that all at just 12 a.m. and pick your date. But this is the only format that Lightroom will read, as far as I know.
Okay, well, at least that's something, isn't it?
Yeah. And if you're not seeing it pop up in Lightroom, I believe there is a read metadata from file command in one of the menus. I haven't looked at it in a little while, but I do believe I saw that there. So if it's not automatically pulling it in, it's pulling an older version of your metadata from the catalog, you can overwrite with what's in XMP.
Okay, well, that's good to know. And can you stack photos in Mylio or no?
Sort of. That's a really good question. So the stacking in Mylio is meant for stacking edits. So if you use the Lightroom plugin that works with Mylio, what that does when you create an edit in Lightroom, you drag your picture into the plugin in Lightroom. And what that does is it creates an edited version of your picture in the folder that Mylio sees. It actually stacks with your original in your Mylio library. You can do that with other editors as well. Let me find an example here. I've got, let's see here. All right, so let me take a look at this one, not that one, this one. Okay, so in this instance, I have my original RAW, which is a CR3 from my Canon. I have my edited TIFF file, and I have an XMP file, and these are all stacked together here in Mylio. And all I'm seeing right here is the edited version, which is the TIFF. If I go ahead and take a look at this in Finder, what you're going to see is I've got my original file here. Let's see. Apparently have an ACR. Oh, that's my Adobe Camera Raw. That's what that is. So Mylio doesn't see that one. But here's my original RAW. Here's my display TIFF. So this is a TIFF version that I edited, and then I added the underscore display, which tells Mylio to stack that with the edited version. So we do have some documentation on this in the manual, and I have a new article coming soon that's going to go into more detail. But for now, let me go ahead and pull that up. If you go into the editing section of the manual and into editing with an external editor, I believe it's using the open with command. If you scroll down to the bottom, it talks about using creating a display copy right here. But like I said, I've got a new article coming with far more information that goes in deeper on what this means, what stacks and what doesn't. So that is how we can stack in Mylio. Now, if you're looking for ways to stack, let's say bracketed images, unfortunately, we don't have that yet. I hope to see that in the future. I don't have any kind of ETA on that. It's something that I've asked for personally, but if that's something that'd be helpful to you, go to forum.mylio.com into those feature requests and post that there. Let's
Okay, well,
see
that's
here.
helpful.
Good.
What about Topaz? If you were using a Topaz new thing, which combines all 3 of their apps.
I use Topaz Photo AI all the time. When you save your image, if you want to just add the underscore display at the bottom, it'll stack it with the original. Does that make sense?
Yes. So
Okay.
is it like it's a virtual copy, or is it the actual full code?
It's a full copy. So, well, it's whatever you decide to save. So if you're doing it manually, let's go ahead and just do this really quick. Here, let me find one. This one. All right, so let's say I want to run this through Photo AI. I'm going to go ahead and go up to Photo, Open With, and Topaz Photo AI. I'm going to go ahead and open the original. And I have a feeling I already did this when I did it through Photoshop. So yeah, it's going to create some weird artifacts because it's already been like sharpened and sharpened and sharpened. But what I can do here is then go to Save Image. And what I want to do is add here under suffix, instead of add topaz, I can do underscore display. And I'm going to want to save it to the original folder. And the format, I'm going to save it as another TIFF. And you can do this with a JPEG, you can do this with a TIFF. And the quality level is what you set. So I can go ahead and hit save. And that's going to process. Oh, it added another denoise hyphen there at the end. So that's probably not going to work like I want it to. I didn't know that it was going to add that. That's interesting. So Topaz, I guess, does their own kind of strange file renaming thing. In that instance, if it's a different file name, like this one has the dash denoise, it's probably going to save it next to my original in the original folder, not stacked with the original.
Yeah, I think you could probably rename it. There's probably a way you can name it with having display, but that's really helpful. And thank you for that specific question.
You're very welcome.
One point, Rob, is if you rename in your either Explorer or Finder, Mylio will actually recover that improperly named file from your vault. You have to rename from inside Mylio or you get in kind of a vicious circle.
Yep.
I get that.
See what other questions we have here in the chat. Daryl says, is this a demo for pros or consumers? Daryl, I hope it's workable for both people who are professional photo organizers. If they haven't heard of or used Mylio before, hopefully this gives you an idea of what our software can do. And if you're a Mylio user, again, a lot of us are doing our own photos, managing our own photos and getting our own histories in order. So hopefully it appeals to both. Mark, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time. Let's see. Peggy says, if you assign a date with the Epson scanner, will it transfer to Mylio? I believe it does. I'll have to double check that. I haven't run it in a little while, so I need to verify that, but I think it does.
This is Larry. Yeah, it certainly does.
Awesome. Thanks for confirming that. Alan asked if the session's going to be a video afterwards. Yes, we are recording, and I will hopefully get this posted within a week or so. It just depends on how quickly my video editor can get the recording back to me. Daryl asks about Mylio and iCloud. Right now, we do not support iCloud. I do hope at some point in the future we can, but they have their own synchronization service, so it's not really in their best interest to work with ours because in some respects we compete, but hopefully we can add that at some point in the future. But right now our options are Google Drive, Microsoft OneDrive, and we'll be adding some more, I think, by the end of the month. Let's see here. Is information keyed for images within Mylio? Does that information follow the image? Tammy, I think maybe what you're asking is if all of this information that we enter here in our metadata in the info panel, does that stay with the image? It's not embedded into your image as a whole, but it is in the XMP sidecar file that goes with it. And that XMP file is readable by just about any photo editing application out there. It's not proprietary to Mylio. So you can, if you do a bunch of organization in Mylio, that is all industry standard stuff, and that can go with you, whatever application you choose to use. All right. Taking a look here through the chat, seeing what else I requested. So there's a few more here at the end. All right, so Barbara says, does that mean if photos are in iCloud, I can't bring them into Mylio? I would have to download a separate storage device first. No, so when I say that Mylio can't work with iCloud, that means I can't add Mylio as, I can't add iCloud as a device to Mylio. So if I look here in the dashboard and I go over to my devices and I go down to my drives and clouds, I can't add iCloud here. But what I can do is I can access my iCloud photos, my iCloud photo library, and I can bring that into Mylio Photos very seamlessly. So there's a couple of different ways you can do it. You can go to your phone when you install Mylio Photos on an iPhone. You just tell it to go ahead and give access to your camera roll. It will automatically bring in all of your photos that are in your iCloud photo library. The other way you can do it is if you're on a Mac, You can go up here to the plus and go here to add media from photos from Mac OS. Choose your Apple Photos library. And again, it will automatically bring all of that information in. So I hope that's helpful. All right. Are there any other questions that I missed or anybody who needs any clarifications? All right. Well, I want to thank you, Cathi, for joining us. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Was there one more question?
I'm sorry, I did have one question.
Sure.
You said you can import from Google Photos. Does that import directly from Google Photos, or do you have to use the whole Google takeout system?
You have to use takeout.
Great, thank you.
You're very welcome. The cool thing is, though, once you get that takeout file, you just have to have that zip file, point Mylio to the zip file, and then it will bring everything in. So you don't have to digest it out of the zip file before you can bring it in.
Okay, great, thank you.
You're welcome. Peggy says, can you import from Lightroom too? So Peggy, what Lightroom is it doesn't actually hold your photos, but it points to your photos on your hard drive. What you can do is point Mylio to that same group of photos, and they will view those same originals. Mylio can then bring in your same metadata, and there's a lot of information about your photos that Mylio can read from Lightroom. The thing that it can't read natively is going to be your edits. Your edits are stored in your Lightroom catalog, and that's where that Lightroom plugin comes in handy, and it can help you create what we call a display copy, so you can see your edits from Lightroom in your Mylio catalog. And there's more information on how to do that in our manual. All right. You're very welcome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Cathi, for joining us today and sparking a great conversation and lots of awesome questions. Appreciate everybody joining us today and hope to see you at more coffee breaks.
All right, thank you.
Have a great day, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Night.